On today's episode, we are welcoming Sara Cohen to the show. Sara is a leading fertility lawyer who's based in Toronto, and she works with clients across Canada and internationally. She advises intended parents, surrogates, donors, clinics, hospitals, and cryobanks on a wide range of fertility law matters. Sara was named as one of the top 25 most influential lawyers in Canada by Canadian Lawyer magazine and recognized by Lexpert as a leading lawyer to watch. She combines a deep expertise with a compassionate, collaborative approach. She serves on the ethics committee of a major fertility clinic, is past president of Fertility Matters Canada, and a fellow of the Academy of Adoption and Assisted Reproduction Attorneys. An internationally sought-after speaker and published author, she taught reproductive law at Osgoode Hall Law School and has been invited by international and domestic governments to consult on legal reform in fertility and parentage law. But above all, Sara is committed to helping families grow with compassion, legal security, and integrity. Sara, thank you so much for taking some time out of your, what sounds like extremely busy days, to speak with us on My Fertility Podcast. We're so excited to have you.
We are looking forward to this conversation today. Tell us about yourself. Tell us how you got into fertility law and why you do what you do.
Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here and love how smiley you guys are and how positive. Such a fun group of doctors, which you don't say that often, though it's really cool. So I've been practicing fertility law exclusively for 15 years. I don't do anything else. I've worked with thousands of people. Most of my work is with surrogacy, egg donation, sperm donation, embryo donation. And I did have some of my own fertility struggles, but I was already pretty sure this is what I wanted to do from the time I was younger. And when I was in undergrad, I worked at one of the clinics doing some research. When I was in law school, I wrote every single paper about ART because at that time, new legislation was coming in and I didn't like it. And I was expressing that in every single paper. And I spent a summer at Princeton University's Office of Population Research, helping someone edit one of their dissertations, etc. And this has just always been my passion. I love what I do. I also don't think you get to speak to many lawyers who say that, but I love what I do.
It's interesting because I was having this conversation with my husband last night and he was asking, we were like, oh, what are you up to tomorrow? I said, oh, we're interviewing a fertility lawyer. Like, this is going to be really cool. Kind of an interesting perspective, get into the nitty gritty and find out everything. And he's like, a fertility lawyer? He's like, what's that? I've never heard of that. And I'm like, well, think about it though. I mean, there's so many aspects of the law and legal stuff in fertility and fertility care. For somebody who is outside of maybe broaching fertility for the first time, can you tell us what is fertility law? What does it encompass? What kind of cases or some examples? And how does it differ from other areas of family law, let's say?
Great question. Fertility law is extremely niche, and there's not a lot of us in the country. It's also the kind of thing people shouldn't dabble with. So, there's not lots. There's a few great lawyers across the country who really know what they're doing. And I would really suggest people kind of focus on those ones. It isn't like regular family law for the most part, because really we're helping create families as opposed to breaking up families. Where family law is a big part of it is securing that family, making sure the intended parents are the parents. And when we're working with a surrogate or an egg donor, sperm donor, embryo donor, basically making sure the people who intend to be the parents are the parents and the people who do not intend to be the parents are not the parents. And just making sure that the family is secure. However, fertility law also encompasses things like criminal law, because unfortunately, the Assisted Human Reproduction Act really stands on criminal law. So it's illegal to pay a surrogate, illegal to pay a donor, punishable by up to 10 years in jail and or $500,000. Then there's kind of some human rights issues we deal with, discrimination issues we deal with. And then there's also health law. So it's this kind of, if there's a Venn diagram where somewhere here with a lot of places that touch on us, And it's also really different because I think if done well, it should be extremely collaborative as opposed to fighting for and being aggressive. To the end of the day, we're trying, or I think we should be trying to bring people together. Most of the people that I see as clients, your patients, are either people, we call them intended parents, who are looking to have a child or children through surrogacy, or, and sometimes, and egg donation, sperm donation, and embryo donation. So most of my work, I'm representing intended parents, but sometimes I'm representing surrogates or donors. And then I don't think that many other lawyers in fertility do this, but I also work sometimes for the clinics, working on things like consent forms, or they come to me for advice. If some clients in my situation, maybe they've divorced and someone wants to use an embryo and there's a fight over it, so they might come to me for that. And I also deal with cryobanks and trying to give some advice about import of gametes into Canada. So I kind of touch on a lot of different areas, and I'm extremely passionate about it. I've been doing it for 15 years straight, and I'm not bored. I love it.
I've known you for not all of those 15 years. I've known you for a few of those 15 years. And I can say it's true. You are so passionate about this. And every time that we've met at different meetings or events, or when we serve at CFAs together, I can tell I've always been impressed by how knowledgeable you are about fertility law and how passionate you are about fertility law. So while I haven't known you for all of those 15 years, it totally tracks when you say, I love this and I'm never bored. I can attest to that.
Awesome. I'm glad. You never know how other people see you, but that's kind of cool.
Can you walk us, Sara, through some of the scenarios and at what point in their journey should someone say, okay, it is time to consult with a fertility lawyer? What kind of scenarios would that be? And at what point within that journey of surrogacy or egg donation or sperm donation should clients/patients be thinking about a fertility lawyer?
From my perspective, they should be seeking a fertility lawyer very early in the journey. And I give free consultations, and I assume other fertility lawyers do too. At least get some background information so you're not accidentally breaching the law, because the law comes into play very early about offering to pay, paying, etc., about parentage issues. There's a ton of transnational, transprovincial action and relationships when it comes to third-party reproduction. So, you might have your sister in one province, you're in another, she's donating eggs to you. You might have a surrogate in one province, and your lawyer's going to know that's not really going to work. We can't make you the parents if we do surrogacy in that province. So you need to speak to someone really early on in the process. Most of my clients come to me very early, and I'm really lucky. I kind of know my way around the ART world as much as someone who's not a doctor or an embryologist can, because that's just what I do. So we really work together from the beginning and talking to them about clinics, talking to them about agencies, how to find someone on your own if you want to work with an agency. Our law is kind of gray in some places, especially when it comes to agencies. And I wish that weren't the case, but it is. So I think clients need to be aware of what risks, if any, they're taking early. I'm really big on saying, I've been to medical school 0 days. So I am not the person giving you medical advice whatsoever. I can tell you who's nice, but I can't tell you how to do things, etc. But I want to stay in my lane. I'm the lawyer, but I want other people to stay in their lanes too. Like doctor give medical advice, lawyer give legal advice, counselors give the psychological advice, etc. It's really collaborative and it works really well that way. And it's great when there's communication between all the pieces, because to some extent, it's not that our goals are different, but there's just a bigger picture about how they all work together.
So just to be super clear for our audience who's listening right now, it sounds to me like somebody who is considering even going down the third party route, again, donor egg, donor sperm surrogacy, you should really be consulting a fertility lawyer before you even get into the sperm banks, agencies, egg banks. It's almost like, you see your doctor, you have that discussion or that introduction to the discussion. If you're thinking about it, next stop is fertility lawyer. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair to say. I also think because the LGBTQ community uses fertility services so much, sometimes it's the opposite. And I think you guys know that. I have a lot of clients who come to me first. So it goes both ways. It's a little different for heterosexual clients, but the LGBTQ community very often, not always, knows that they're going to have to be involved in fertility services in order to build their families. So a lot of them come to me first. Something that I think might be different is I find fertility law has a lot of handholding. I charge flat fees. And the reason for that is I don't want my clients to be scared to come to me. And it can be an emotional process. It's not like a one and done kind of relationship. We talk once and that's all. We're going to be in touch throughout the process. I love it. It's very compassionate law. I think, we're not doing business deals. We're not helping someone buy a business, etc. We're doing, for many people, what is the most important thing I think they're ever going to do. So you guys know exactly what I'm talking about.
Absolutely, yes.
There's a certain compassion and participation in people's lives that maybe is a little bit different than other areas of law.
And on that note, Sara, when patients ask me specifically about fertility lawyers, I know a few in the field and I can mention names and your name always comes up in that conversation. But if somebody doesn't have that referral directly from their fertility physician and they're just out in the world on the internet, Googling fertility lawyer, what are some of the things they need to be asking themselves or looking on the website? What are some of the things to watch out for to make sure that they are consulting the right person for their situation?
Great question. And I think that happens a lot because it's very exciting, fertility law. So there's a lot of people who may want to get into it, but actually don't have the experience yet. If it's a more junior lawyer, they should probably be working with a lawyer who has had more experience in order to share that experience before they do it. Because the hardest files are usually with someone who's like a real estate lawyer and really just doesn't yet know what they're doing and learning on the job. And that's really tough for everyone involved. So you asked what people should be looking for. One of them is they should check if the lawyer is a fellow of the Academy of Adoption and Assisted Reproduction Attorneys. And there's, one or a few in every jurisdiction, but it's, a little bit snooty group that a judge has to recommend you and say, this is someone that I think does this area particularly well. You have to have done at least 50 cases in order to get in. So you're going to find someone experienced. There's a certain amount of continuing legal education you're required to do in the area. And you've got references between the fellows and, a judge, etc. So that grouping is really important. And I feel you can trust them for the most part. I don't really believe in taking ideas from websites. So for example, if I'm introducing a client to a clinic, I'm never like, here's their website. I want to put them directly with a doctor who I know is going to take care of them because this is like a personal thing. It's not looking for like a regular business. I think you do want to know that they've done this at least a number of times, that you're not the first person. And if they haven't done it, that they can find a mentor who will walk them through it. I think that's important. I'm going to say something that's maybe not the most popular, so excuse me. Sometimes within the third-party world, I find that the professionals involved sometimes treat it more as a business than I'd like them to and kind of forget their doctors, their lawyers, their counselors first. Our duty is to patient, to the clients, etc. And I find that sometimes there's relationships that worry me. Maybe a lawyer works so much with this one agency that to some extent they're really backing that agency. They're not really backing the patient.
Right.
And that's hard to understand if you're new to this world. So talk to your doctor for sure. But there's also a lot of, this is going to sound crazy, but talk to former clients of the lawyers if you can. certainly find fellows of the Academy of Adoption and Assisted Reproduction attorneys. That's a good idea. And at the end of the day, though, you have to have a click with this person. I do a lot of kind of meet and greets because you want to make sure you guys are on the same page. You want to make sure you trust each other. But also, there's sometimes different philosophies. The way I think is very child-centered. Let's consider what's going to be best and what we believe is going to be best. And there's some clients who maybe don't think that way. They really want anonymity. And it's not that I won't participate in those situations. It's that my philosophy is different than that. My philosophy is like, well, have you thought about what that's going to mean for the child? So it doesn't mean we won't work together, but I might not be your perfect match, and that's okay.
That's a really, really good point. And it's interesting because I think that's probably the same thing we say about that fertility physician and patient relationship.
That's right. I was thinking that.
Okay, good reviews, other patients like them. But at the end of the day, it's that click, right? And it's that kind of the match in philosophies and sort of that vibe and feeling and, as Gen Z says, the vibe check, if you will.
I didn't even know that Gen Z said that. I'm so out of it.
For the record, it's not because I know. It's because I have lots of nieces and nephews who tell me, for the record. It is actually a really good description of exactly what it is, right? Such a key point for sure. So if somebody is sort of starting out on that third-party reproduction journey, egg donation, sperm donation, surrogacy, can you kind of walk us through what the general legal steps are or what those kind of considerations are?
Sure. All of those are a little bit different. And I don't do a lot of work about when people are working with sperm banks because at that point, the sperm is already owned by the bank. There is no direct relationship between the donor and the recipients. So it's just they each have a relationship with the sperm bank. And to be honest, they can't really or are signing away their rights to contact each other, at least for a certain amount of time. It is not my favorite way for people to build their family with a sperm bank for that reason. What if the sperm bank closes? How are you getting information at that point about the donor? And I think people are very confident that, I signed something for open ID, that my child will have this information if they want it when they reach the age of 18. That worries me. There is no government or, body that's regulated that's holding on to this information. And I really don't like that. For me, celebrating third-party reproduction is really important. These kids, in my opinion, and all the evidence shows, they do really well as long as there's no surprises and secrets kept from them. And that's what we know. So I do a lot of work with known donors, and it can be a family member, it could be a friend, etc. And when it comes to sperm donation, that's really what I see, friend, family member, etc. When it comes to egg donation, my role is very different. And in both situations, I'm drafting contracts. Who is the parent? Who's not the parent? Are we reimbursing them for anything? What does Health Canada say about the categories for which we can reimburse them? Is there a maximum amount? What happens about, for example, with an egg donor, all of the eggs retrieved from her body in that one cycle belong to the intended parents. All of the embryos created from those eggs belong to the intended parents. Does she understand this doesn't mean for one child? They can have as many kids as they want. What are we allowed to do with excess embryos? Are we allowed to donate them to science, donate them to research? Must we destroy them? Can we donate them to another person to have a child? And a lot of the time when I see egg donors, when I say no, it might not be a friend or a family member. So there are agencies in Canada that do egg donation and will introduce you to a donor. I always prefer that for kind of the reasons I mentioned, but I want ideally my client to have direct contact information for the donor. So if she finds out new health information about herself or her parents or her siblings or her kids, I can contract with it so she has an obligation to tell the intended parents. If the intended parents have a baby, they're going to tell her. If she has a baby in the future, these kids are genetically related to each other. great idea that we at least know each other's names so that they don't accidentally have sex with each other one day. And a lot of tracking about the health information that might be relevant for these kids, as well as her family and her kids. So it's actually probably a lot more extensive than people think it is. And they probably think they're just signing a paper like, this is my kid, not yours. It's really detailed confidentiality. What are we putting up on social media? What are we not? Who are we allowed to tell, etc. For me, if I always say to my clients, I'm like, if you were my sister, what would I recommend you do? That's what I would recommend you do. Agencies are a tough area in Canadian law. But when it comes to donor agencies, it's different than surrogacy agencies. It is not illegal to pay a donor agency. It's illegal to pay a donor or offer to pay a donor, but it's not illegal to pay a donor agency for matching, finding you a donor, etc. And I think there's some that do a great job in Canada, and there's some that do less of a great job. They're not regulated. And they're also not regulated in the United States, to the best of my knowledge. This isn't a rare situation. I'd love to see some regulation. I think we owe it to the kids to see some regulation. We have regulation of adoption agencies, for example, but we don't have for egg donation agencies. We don't have for surrogacy agencies. Surrogacy tends to be harder from a legal perspective because the question of who is a parent is answered completely differently province by province. Okay? So Ontario law, extremely flexible. British Columbia law, extremely flexible. Alberta law, not so flexible. And Quebec law, big mess. Do not do surrogacy in Quebec. Every time they change their law, they say it's making it better, it's making it worse. It's awful, okay? But if people don't know that and they start moving forward with the surrogate, they're already so emotionally invested and financially invested even before an embryo transfer happens. For example, in Alberta, there must be a genetic connection between the embryo and at least one of the parents. Because otherwise, if the baby's born in Alberta, the intended parents are not a parent of this child. That's not the case in Ontario. That's not the case in British Columbia. So that's kind of an example of why you need legal advice really, really early. That process with surrogacy, I would say I'm much more involved with my clients for a longer period of time during the surrogacy process. There's a contract that must be in place prior to the embryo transfer. Without that contract, it doesn't matter who's genetically related to that baby. The surrogate is the mom. Okay. Mm-hmm. There's also a legal process that happens after the baby's born. That legal process looks different in every province. The surrogate must have independent legal advice, and the intended parents pay for that lawyer. So sometimes they think that means the lawyer is going to do what they want them to do. Not at all. The surrogate needs to have her own lawyer. Same with the donor. Should always have her own lawyer. I really don't like when people try to cut corners. Everyone deserves representation. Everyone deserves an opportunity to make an informed decision. The surrogacy contracts are long in Canada. They're tens of pages, so like 40 pages often. And they deal probably with so much more than people who are outside of the surrogacy world would assume. So the most important thing is who is a parent and who's not a parent. The financial part is important because, of course, you can't pay a surrogate in Canada. People know that, or I think most people know that, punishable by up to 10 years in jail and or $500,000. But you can reimburse a surrogate. You don't have an obligation to do so unless you're contractually obligated to. And even where you have a sister, for example, caring for her sister, usually what I see is the biggest concern from a surrogate is what happens if she can't go to work. Not because she doesn't want to, but as a result of the pregnancy. And the law requires that a doctor, so it could be you guys, it could be an OB, but a doctor must certify in writing that she can't work in order to protect her health or the health of the fetus. But that's kind of her risk. And that has to be negotiated, and the surrogate must be protected, because if she's going to do this amazing thing for the intended parents, it shouldn't hurt herself or her family in any way financially we're talking about. So there's a lot of discussion there. We talk about how many embryos we're going to transfer, who's going to be the doctor, how many times we're willing to do a transfer. Are we using a midwife or an OB? Are we giving birth at a hospital? Which hospital? Who's allowed to be there in the room when you give birth? We talk about some really tough things, like how we feel about abortion, if there is an abnormality with the fetus. Understanding, and something that's so hard for intended parents often to understand, that might be their baby, but it's a surrogate's body. At the end of the day, she's making the call. So we're going to have to suss out really early on, hopefully that we're all on the same page when it comes to how we feel about terminating a pregnancy if there's abnormality, if the intended parents ask the surrogate to do so. And of course, the surrogate has every right to terminate a pregnancy if her health is significantly at risk. We talk about what happens if the embryos split, because are you willing to carry twins if it splits? Insurance policies, confidentiality, like I could go on and on. And I find it fascinating. Everybody comes to fertility law from a different vantage point, and I think a lot of them are completely reasonable, and I respect them. Mine is that this should be a really positive experience for not only the parents, not only the baby, of course, but also the surrogate or the donor. And we need to make this a very valuable experience for them where they feel good about themselves. And part of that is, as lawyers, we're often trained, I was a litigation lawyer for big banks for a few years before I did this. And as lawyers, we're trained kind of to fight for our clients' rights and as far as you can go. But sometimes when you're doing surrogacy, fighting like that is actually hurting your client. So finding that area of collaboration and respect for each other, and it shouldn't be there's a winner and a loser, I think that can't be kind of lost in translation. That is a big part of what I think makes a good fertility lawyer.
Thank you so much for that answer. And you kind of answered my question before I asked, because I was kind of asking particularly, what are the kind of things that you look in a surrogacy contract? So that's great that you went through that. Then the follow-up question is, and this is something that people ask me all the time, is what are the approximate costs for, let's say, a surrogate contract, which I assume would be separate from an egg donor type of contract? Can you give us an idea of the cost involved?
I can tell you that in my experience, the lawyers who practice in this area the most, who I, again, would really suggest you work with one of the fertility lawyers who does this a lot, I think almost all of us charge a flat fee. And I think that's a good idea. Go to a lawyer, find out what they're going to cost. And as long as you understand the parameters of what they're providing to you, like they're not also helping you buy a house or whatever, they're doing the surrogacy work, etc., you're going to know up front what it's going to cost you. But I can tell you the surrogate's lawyer is always going to charge less than the intended parent's lawyer, because I'm writing the contract for the parents. And the lawyer for the surrogate is really important, but they're not writing the contract. They're reviewing what's already been written and negotiating on behalf of the surrogate and making sure she understands it. We didn't talk before about you need also a lawyer, most provinces, after the baby's born too, because at the moment a baby's born through surrogacy in Canada, the surrogate is still the legal mom. So we have to still go through a process to either get a court order and a birth certificate, or just a birth certificate, depending on the province, that puts the intended parents and not the surrogate on the birth certificate. But that process, the final consent, can only be given after the baby's born. So you are going to need a lawyer for that part too. Every lawyer has a different cost, and every province, the work needed is very different. So I usually tell my clients to budget anywhere between about $2,000 to $6,000 for that, but you only pay that part usually once you reach the point of viability in the pregnancy. And that's be based on the lawyer in that province. So for example, I have a lawyer in every province that I trust that I refer to if I have clients who are having a baby in that province. And once they reach the point of viability, don't hire me again, hire them. I don't get referral fees. I don't take referral fees from them. I don't get kickbacks or anything, but this is who I think is best. If you don't like them, no problem. We can find someone else. But usually they're the best. It's really hard in some of the smaller provinces to find someone who knows what they're doing. So that's really tough. A donor contract, I see the rates going anywhere from about $1,500 to $2,000 in there. I think those are fair expectations. And depending on when you play this podcast, I don't know how many years in the future someone's going to look. As of today's recording, it's July 2025. I think that's a pretty good kind of guesstimate about what you'd be looking to pay. I usually say to my clients, the maybe bad part is the legal fees are going to be the least problematic of affording a surrogacy. It is an absolute fortune. It really is.
One of the things that people sometimes tell me when they're thinking about egg donors and surrogates is, what if the surrogate changes their mind and I can't have my baby? Or what if the egg donor comes after me 5 years later saying, this is my child and you have to give it back, which I've never seen happen in my practice, also about 15 years. But can you address those concerns that people have maybe from seeing Netflix documentaries or hearing stories on social media? Because I think that is a real fear for many people that are thinking about this journey.
Yeah, I think you're right. I hear the same. And when I'm talking about surrogacy, for example, I always tell my clients, there have been no cases, to the best of my knowledge, in Canada where a gestational surrogate tried to keep a baby. And then I usually make the joke that your baby's going to be very cute, very lovable, but they don't want your baby. It used to keep me up at night when I started doing this work. I was worried about that because we only have post-birth orders. The surrogate still has to sign her rights away after the baby's born. And that's true in every province. But really, we've never seen it happen, and I'm just not worried about it. Donor law, 100% everyone should have a contract. No questions asked. And there's many reasons for that, and some of them we talked about before, which is really just about information exchange. But also, because I'm in Ontario, you guys are in Ontario, the retrievals you do are going to be in Ontario, and Ontario law is going to apply for those. Ontario law is amazing, but part of what makes it so amazing is that it really respects non-heteronormative family building. And what that means is, or it can mean, is it's very clear a donor is not a parent, but all of them could be parents together. So we want to be clear, no. The intended parents are the parents, the donor's not a parent with them. And that's really important. I have never seen, and I don't know of any situation where there's been an egg donor who has come back to seek a child. The weird part is, before our legislation changed in 2017 in Ontario, we had some sperm donors who came after the kids. And it was actually the legislation, the biggest reason it needed to change was for gay women, because it was dangerous using a known sperm donor, because the old idea was that whoever's genetically related to the baby through the male side is the parent. And that was very dangerous for those families. So that's why January 1st, 2017, the law changed in Ontario, and it's much better. I understand the concern. The law is so strong now that I'm just not worried. I don't think it's realistic. We do psychological assessments, or there's different names for it at every clinic. And if we're working with someone we trust, and there's some great counselors who I really trust, they're going to suss that out and make sure this person gets it. They know you are not a parent. That's also why they have to get independent legal advice, because their lawyer's job is to be able to explain to the donor exactly what's going to happen. They can have as many kids as they want. You have no right to this child as if you're not genetically related to them, not your baby. They can pick up, move to Australia. They don't have to get your permission, nothing. You need to understand that. And what I do on my contracts is I have the lawyer for the donor and the surrogate sign a certificate of independent legal advice that I have given this advice to my client. I believe they understand all of the implications of it. So that's how we handle it. I know that's a fear, and I get where that's coming from, but it doesn't pan out in reality.
Thank you for clarifying that and being clear about that. If there's one great clip that I'm going to make sure all patients in the third-party world listen to, it's going to be that, right? Because again, that comes up a lot, which is a very understandable anxiety for sure. Now, you've alluded a couple times to the fact that agencies are sort of in this gray zone of law, that it's sort of a bit gray area. Certainly, there are some fertility clinics who work with agencies. Markham Fertility certainly does. There are other fertility clinics who do not work with agencies. What is this gray zone? Like, why does it exist? What does it mean for the patient/client? And so then if somebody is working with an agency, what are the red flags that people should be watching out for?
That's a great question. And I get that question all the time. And you're right. There's some clinics who just refuse to work with agencies and they're afraid that they're just illegal. I think it's first really important that the clinic understand there's a difference with the law between a donor agency and a surrogacy agency. A donor agency is legal as long as they're not paying the donor. So paying the agency, no problem. They can help you find a donor. They can support that. There's no question about the legality of it. The part where there is a question is in the Assisted Human Reproduction Act. It also says it's illegal to compensate or to give consideration to someone for arranging the services of a surrogate mother. Probably the intention was to say agencies in the surrogacy world are illegal. But the way it's written is so vague. So is it illegal to pay someone to make their appointments at Markham Fertility for the surrogate? Are they arranging the services and therefore it's illegal to pay someone to counsel through it, to hold hands through it, to help refer them to a lawyer, help refer them to a clinic, etc.? And we don't really know. The reason we don't know is there's no case exactly on point. There was a single time that there was a prosecution, to the best of my knowledge, where an agency was charged, and they were charged with paying surrogates, paying donors, but they were also charged with accepting consideration for arranging the services of a surrogate mother. And they pled guilty to paying the donors and paying the surrogates. But the part about accepting consideration for arranging the services of a surrogate mother, the prosecution dropped with respect to, so they didn't continue with the charge with respect to Canadian surrogacies, because the agency provided so much more than just being like, oh, you gave me money, here's a surrogate. Like, that's not what the agency did. They provide so many more services, support, introductions, help if there's any disputes, manage funds between them, et cetera, like a lot more than that. They did plead guilty, though, to accepting consideration for an American surrogacy, where all they did was introduce the Canadian intended parent to the surrogacy agency, but that's all they did. So in that case, we know that that was basically accepting consideration for arranging the services of a surrogate mother. Unfortunately, I'm talking to you a bit like a lawyer, so I'm going to try to make that a little bit more clear. It is void for vagueness. It is unclear what the law is with respect to agencies that are surrogacy agencies in Canada. Part of what that means is, are you breaking the law? We're not so sure. What's the possible consequence of that? Punishable by up to 10 years in jail and or $500,000. But likely, realistically, that's more of an academic perspective than what's really on the ground. But that depends on the agency and what services they're truly providing, what time you're making the payment, etc. And the agencies between them have different opinions on, if I first introduce you to a surrogate and you only pay me after, does that make it legal because you're not paying me for matching? Or if you pay me for access to a platform where I don't match you, but you guys can match them yourselves, is that legal? So there's lots of different setups. And I think for me, clients need to understand what risks they're taking, what it looks like in different agencies. I will tell you, there's also some agencies that I worry about for other reasons. And there's some that I think are great and some that are willing to take more risks than others. And you don't want to be responsible for the risks that someone's taking on your behalf. The other thing I think people should know, and I don't think they understand, is again, these aren't regulated. It's just a regular business, but I don't think you're ever going to sue them because it's a gray area. And it's just not worth it when it's a gray area to draw your attention to this. Plus, the numbers are actually low. So some surrogacy agencies do it really well, but some do it so poorly. And that is one of the things that my clients rely on me the most, is knowing the difference between them, understanding the legal risks with each, and then just the practical risks and what this is going to look like working with the agency.
Sara, you have addressed a lot of misconceptions already, such as, it costs a lot of money to see a fertility lawyer, which you have addressed as not the biggest cost when it comes to surrogacy and egg donation. You've addressed the misconception of my surrogate can take my baby at any time if she wishes to. You have addressed the whole egg donation is illegal in Canada, but you can still pay an agency and that's okay. Are there any other misconceptions about building your family through egg donor and surrogacy from the fertility point of view that you hear that we haven't talked about?
I feel like so many. I feel like unless you're in this world, you don't quite get it. I think because we do altruistic surrogacy in Canada, I think it's really important that people understand that if they don't have a family friend or family member who's going to do this for them, that there may be various reasons why the surrogate wants to participate, but a big thing is she wants your participation. She wants to feel that she's doing something meaningful and fulfilling for herself too. And you have to understand you're not signing a contract and going in 9 months to pick up your baby. This is your pregnancy. She wants a relationship with you. She wants to and deserves to feel really good about what she's doing. I think it's really important that people involved in surrogacy kind of understand it from her perspective. And if they have very reasonable misconceptions or fears about this, that's when they should be relying on the counselors before they even get involved in this, because it might not look exactly like what they expected to look for. I will also say a misconception might be people probably don't know that it's actually easier for gay men to find a surrogate than it is for heterosexual couples. And that's probably because most gay men are coming at this without major trauma, getting to surrogacy, and this is like this wonderful opportunity. Whereas for a lot of heterosexual people, this is after some major trauma and loss. I think that might be surprising to people. And I'm going to say the last thing that I think is surprising to people is actually how awesome these surrogates are often. And people often, they don't quite trust why someone would want to do this. And I probably had questions about that 15 years ago. I wasn't quite sure what to expect. I have met so many amazing people that they'll do surrogacy again and again because this becomes part of their story. I am someone who helps people have a baby that they couldn't do for themselves. I don't pretend everyone's perfect, but I am blown away by the true generous nature of a lot of these women. Sometimes with egg donation, although I don't get to know them as well because it's a faster contract participation, but a lot of the surrogates just blow me away with how awesome they are.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I have met so many surrogates through my career. And when I first started, I was like, what's going on here? Exactly like you. But then I've met them and they truly are so moved by the patient and the intended parent story, and they want to help. And it's an incredible gift. And they know that they have this potential within their body to provide a gift. And they value that very much. Like you said, it becomes part of their story that they are capable of doing this for somebody else.
I find it so touching. I'm like not quite tearing, but I'm kind of tearing up as you say that. It just doesn't get old. This is so beautiful.
I always call surrogates unicorns. In a way, like they're these mythical beings that are doing this like absolutely mind-blowing thing for somebody else. And so whenever I'm talking to intended parent patients, I'm like, this person's a unicorn. They absolutely should be valued and they should absolutely be appreciated. And I'm always like just blown away that people do it.
Sara, I have another question for you. You practice in Ontario, we practice in Ontario, but it's not easy, as you alluded to, finding a surrogate in Ontario, especially, like you said, if you're a heterosexual couple. So some of my patients ask me, Dr. Garcia, should I just go to the US? Should I go to another country to get a surrogate? What are your thoughts on that?
I hear it all the time too, that if you don't have someone in your life who's going to be a surrogate, the delay in finding a surrogate can be extremely upsetting. And because so much of it is about that relationship, like clicking with the surrogate and her clicking with you and her just being touched by you and thinking you're awesome people and wants to help you, you can't always give like a number, like this is going to take you 1 year. This is going to take you 6 months. This is going to take you 2 years. And that's really hard. The intended parents in Canada who do the best in finding surrogates happen to be outgoing people who are willing to put themselves out there and put the time and energy and effort in. And I'm going to be honest, not everyone's like that. Sometimes people are shy or they're in too much pain, and it's really hard, especially in those situations. I would rather people do surrogacy in Canada. I think it's beautiful when done well. If they're going to go abroad, the only place I would say is the United States, and not even everywhere in the United States. And currently we have some major problems. It's July 2025 and major issues in the United States about if a baby is going to be born through surrogacy, if that baby even gets US citizenship. And if they don't get US citizenship, then how are we getting the baby out the US into Canada? We'd have to figure that out because usually they just have the US passport and drive or fly right into Canada because you don't need a visa between them. So there's lots of issues in doing this in the US, probably most obviously that it's an absolute fortune. We're talking like what I see is at least 200,000 plus US dollars. It's a lot of money. But some people choose to do it. Some people say, I'm just more comfortable with a compensated situation. I don't really want to have this close relationship with a surrogate. I'm not comfortable with that. You really need to be understanding of what you're going to pay. And the thing is, though, in many states, because it's state by state, kind of the way it is here, province by province, in terms of the security of the family through surrogacy, there's some that are so strong. You can look at, Nevada, California. The law is just so strong there that it's quite safe to do surrogacy there. But there's also places in the United States where it's not so safe. And that's also when you need a lawyer. So I would introduce, for example, a client to one of the fellows from the Academy of Adoption and Assisted Reproduction Attorneys. You're not going to use a Canadian lawyer to draft that contract because that's really an American contract. But you do have to be aware that you have the potential to be breaking Canadian law. So you have to be very careful about making that payment because you're going to be paying the agency in the United States. They're going to be paying a surrogate, whether it's through an escrow company or elsewhere. So there's potential criminal liability. And I think people think there isn't criminal liability. But if we look at that case I was talking about before, that was a Canadian accepting money from the United States for United States surrogacy. So there is potential for breaking the law, and people have to be aware of that. There's citizenship issues. Some people now are going, I'm seeing a lot of Mexico. If you can avoid anywhere outside of Canada and then anywhere outside of the United States, avoid everywhere. There's nowhere else, in my opinion, that is legally safe, that you can more or less trust the medical system, that we're not worried of someone taking advantage of you. We're not worried about the law with surrogacy, doing a sudden change and suddenly, it's illegal or unsafe to do so. I'm not worried about people being asked for bribes. So, for example, right now I'm working with a gentleman who is Sri Lankan when they decided to do surrogacy in Sri Lanka. And obviously I didn't help with that because I wouldn't. I think it's a very bad idea. But now we're working on getting this baby back into Canada, and it's a big mess. So I think people will be like, oh, well, the Ukraine makes sense because it's really, really easy. But first of all, there's a war, but okay. But on top of that, have you thought about, is there going to be a relationship with the surrogate? What's your child going to be told in that situation? What's going to happen about getting your child back to Canada and their citizenship, etc.? Not only does it complicate it, I just don't think it's done nearly as well. I don't think at the end of the day, your child is probably going to be able to look back on the people who participated in their, conception gestation in the same kind of manner. I guess that's how I feel about it. I think what we have in Canada is very special when it works. And I'd really like for that to continue. And to be honest, I hope it's that way for every person in their own country. That's the way it should be. Everyone in Mexico should have secure surrogacy in Mexico. Everyone in Ukraine. But I mean, for the people inside their country, that's the goal. It's not that people have to travel around the world because they can't actually truly access the services otherwise.
After this fabulous conversation we've had today, I have a suspicion that there's lots of people who are listening to this podcast who are super keen to chat with you and to meet you. Please tell our listeners how they can reach out, how to contact you, what wait times might be to see you, where they can see you. Give us some of that info.
Awesome. So, I mean, it's always my pleasure to speak with anybody. I do free consultations, as I was mentioning before, but I do try to get a little bit of information in advance to be, is this something that's truly fertility law? Is this something I can help you with? I have both on my website and in my reply on my email links to where people can sign up for consultations. They just press a button and they find a time on my calendar that's available to them. If something just isn't going to work time-wise, they can contact my assistant. Calling is a bad idea because I'm so bad at answering my phone. I'm usually with clients. Email's great. I do tell people if for some reason I don't get back to you, just write me again. I'm never going to be offended. I do have a number on the website that you can text message me. So we can arrange a time to chat that way too. I'm sure you can tell I'm super passionate about this and I'm happy to speak with people and at least know that I'm giving them some advice. And even if we don't end up working together, feeling good that they're being what I think is directed in a safe or better direction.
And it's speaking of being super passionate, you and I were having a drink at the Fairmont in Banff. I think it was last year, a beautiful winter day. And we talked for hours that day about motherhood and challenges of raising children and having a career and all the things. But you share a story with me that really stuck with me. And I wonder if you would be able to share that story with our listeners. Go ahead and tell me that story about what your 3-year-old said to you many years ago.
So I'm lucky enough to have 2 boys. And my eldest, when he was about 3, he was sitting up in his bed as I was trying to put him to sleep. And he said to me, "Mama, I know you're my mama, but did I come from your tama?" Tama means tummy. And I just thought that was amazing. I thought it was particularly emotionally intelligent. I also thought it was so cool that he understood that being a parent isn't about who gestates you, and that he understood that it's quite normal to have people born through third-party reproduction, and it's very much a possibility in his life and other people he knows.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was the coolest.
Yeah, I love that story for the same reason, because I mean, it just shows, first of all, that you live and breathe this, because clearly you were talking about this enough that he kind of understood that there's many different ways of being born and being brought into the world. And that he never really questioned that you were his mama, like you call it. He never questioned your relationship or your love for him. And that regardless of how he was born, I love his, "I know you're my mama." It's like, this is not a discussion about that part. We're talking about something else. And that at 3 years of age, he really saw that. I thought that was a real testament to, first of all, to your passion for this field and how much you must be talking about it in front of your children to know. And really a testament to what I want to leave our listeners with and what we say at the fertility clinic all the time, that love is love, and that's what makes a family. It's not the biology, it's not how they're born. It's the love that binds humans together that makes a family. And your 3-year-old understood that.
Yeah, I thought it was so great. And I loved also just his emotional intelligence to make it clear to me right away. This is not questioning that you're my mother. And please give me this information.
That's right. Yeah, I love that.
Amazing. That's a perfect note to end on, I think.
Thank you so much for being with us, Sara. We really enjoy having you here. You share so much information with our listeners. And yeah, let's go for coffee sometime. We're due for another date.
Oh, it would be fun. And by the way, I loved visiting your clinic. It's gorgeous and its energy is so positive.
Well, the gorgeous part is a testament to Dr. Weiss. Every time somebody compliments how beautiful it is, I always have to say it because she's done such a good job and she has agonized over every detail, every fabric, every design.
Blood, sweat, tears.
My contribution is like, did you pick the furniture yet? Did you do it yet? Did you do it yet? That's my contribution.
I think it's wonderful and it feels good and full of light. And it's just that what were you saying? Like the vibe?
The vibe check.
The vibe check.
And that's a wrap for today, Superhumans.
If you're looking to connect, get social with us. Follow us on YouTube and Instagram at My Fertility Podcast or visit us online at markandfertility.com. And don't forget, follow, subscribe, and share your favorite episode.
Thanks for listening to My Fertility Podcast and for being a vital part of our community. We know you've got this.
We're signing off until next Tuesday.
If you found this episode of My Fertility Podcast helpful, please take a moment to head over to the review section and leave us your thoughts. Your reviews and comments are incredibly valuable to us and help guide future episodes. We also welcome you to direct your questions to info@myfertilitypodcast.com.
My Fertility Podcast is produced by Rabbit Media Inc. in conjunction with Dr. Garcia and Dr. Weiss.
Music by Mixkit. Life is a Dream by Michael Ramirez C.
My Fertility Podcast is not intended to replace any type or variation thereof professional medical, health, or legal advice, nor should the content be taken as medical advice. Please contact your primary healthcare professional regarding any medical questions you may have. The information presented in this podcast is based on the knowledge and understanding of the host at the time of recording. Medical knowledge is constantly evolving, and new research may change the understanding of health-related topics. While we strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information, we do not guarantee the completeness, accuracy, or timeliness of the content. The views expressed in this podcast by guests are not those of the host or the management. This podcast is not intended to impose any type of discrimination. My Fertility Podcast and its management are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of this podcast.